This project was for a startup called Earflow. They've developed a health device for kids that helps with ear pressure and problems there. They were launching their product at CES in the US, where they were in the running for an innovation award, and they needed a launch video that could help explain the product at the event, support future marketing, and eventually help drive sales online. But there were a few challenges with this one. We had a tight deadline, we were filming the entire thing in Perth whilst trying to make it not look Australian, and we were working with child talent and families who've never really been on camera before. So in this video, I wanted to break down how we approached the project, some of the decisions we made during planning and filming, and why a lot of commercial production is really about solving problems before we even press record. The deliverable itself sounds fairly straightforward on paper. The client needed a 60-second launch video explaining the problem and showcasing the device. But in reality, projects like this are usually much broader than just make a video. The video needed to work in multiple situations. First, it needed to support the product launch at CES. So it had to quickly communicate the problem, show the device being used, and help people understand what made the product useful. But it also needed long-term value. The client wanted to use the content later across their website, future advertising, and other marketing materials once that product had launched more publicly. So from the beginning, we were already thinking beyond just that single edit. As part of the project, we were also filming a series of how-to videos and social media content, but I'd also arranged for a photographer to come in separately to capture product and lifestyle photography, and that was going to happen at the same time as the video shoot, because the client was going to need a full set of assets and not just one video. One of the biggest challenges on this project was actually finding the right location. Because the product was launching in the US market, we really wanted to avoid having anything that immediately felt recognisably Australian, and especially not feeling like Perth, Western Australia. Now that sounds small, but details like architecture, room styling, lighting, backyard design, and even the overall feel of a home can subconsciously change how a project feels. So I spent quite a bit of time searching for a location that gave us flexibility and looked more internationally neutral. The house we ended up using was really helpful because it had multiple living areas and, more importantly, 2 different kids' bedrooms that we could film in, and that made a huge difference to the project. A lot of studio homes in Perth either don't have access to kids' rooms for filming, let alone styled in a way that will be useful to our project. It's more typical that houses really only give you 1 or 2 strong filming spaces. But with this location, we could move between different rooms and spaces and create the impression of completely different environments. And that helped a lot because we had 2 separate families involved in the shoot, and we really didn't want the audience feeling like everybody was clearly inside the exact same house. So even though we were filming in one location, we were intentionally filming it in a way that created variety and flexibility during editing. The other big challenge was working with children and families who weren't experienced on camera. And honestly, that's very normal for our commercial shoots. Most people we work with are not actors. So a big part of the job becomes helping these people feel comfortable enough that the performance feels natural, and that's especially important with kids. One thing we did intentionally was to prioritize the older child in some of the stronger locations and setups, and that's because he already had experience with the product and was more naturally comfortable during the filming. That overall gave us stronger coverage earlier in the day and helped build confidence in the shoot overall. But generally, the approach is to keep things nice and relaxed. You don't want people overthinking every movement or feeling like they're performing imperfectly for you. So we spend a lot of time coaching and supporting people gently, keeping the environment light-hearted and giving simple direction instead of overcomplicating things. It's also important to note that a lot of the time you can rerun scenes over and over, and you're working with the talent to refine that performance over time. A lot of commercial directing is honestly just communication and energy management. If people feel awkward or stressed, the camera immediately see it, and it's not fun for the talent either. I also brought in a separate photographer to capture product photography and lifestyle images of the product at the same time as I was filming. And I think the logistics of this is something really important that needs discussion when you're working on a commercial project, and that is a collaboration between those who are capturing. The photographer, Chris, and I have worked together multiple times, so we kind of understand how each other works, and that makes the day so much more efficient. Instead of competing for time or constantly resetting things, we're usually trying to piggyback off the same setups wherever possible. So I'll lead a setup video, leaving Chris to piggyback the setup and capture photography, and then we'll swap over. So each person gets to lead the role at some point, and then you swap, but you also get to work off another person's creativity. Then when needed, we can also split off and capture specific setups independently so we get what the client needs. And that approach really gives the client significantly more value from the same production day. One thing that became really important during the shoot was how we divided up the house during production. So I intentionally assigned the stronger areas of the house to the older child talent, who was more experienced on camera and more comfortable using the product naturally. At the same time, the layout of the house helped us separate the different families visually. There were multiple living spaces across 2 levels, which allowed us to rotate setups and create much more perceived variety during editing. And from a production standpoint, it also helped us manage photography and video being captured simultaneously. And that kind of planning becomes really important on commercial shoots because it allows you to maximize the value of both the location and the production day itself. Even though the main deliverable was the launch video and we had the secondary deliverables of social media content and the how-to videos, we knew there was a very high chance that the project would expand once the client started seeing the footage. And to be honest, that's pretty common. Once businesses see the quality of the footage and start recognizing different ways content can be used, they often begin to identify more and more opportunities to put it to use. So I typically intentionally film with that future use in mind. Now, it's normal for us to consider both 16:9 and 9:16 framing while filming, so that footage can be adaptive for social media, vertical advertising, and other platforms later. For this project, we captured the product across multiple environments, indoors and outdoors, so there was more flexibility for future edits and campaigns. But we also over-captured scenes, close-ups and cutaways that weren't specifically planned, but we knew based on experience they would be useful later. That extra planning up front creates much more long-term value for the client. I think projects like this are a really good example of how commercial production is often much more about planning, communication, and problem solving than people realize. And that happens prior to the shoot, but also on shoot day itself. From location selection to directing non-professional talent to capturing both video and photo efficiently, a lot of work really is happening before and around the filming itself. And honestly, that's usually the difference between a stressful shoot and a smooth one. The final result from this project, firstly, the client won at CES. Congratulations to Airflow for taking out Best Innovation in Digital Health at CES 2026. Very impressive. And from our side, whilst we continue to work through the original list of deliverables, we've already started expanding into additional deliverables at the request of the client, including advertising edits and ongoing marketing asset, which is exactly why we approach the shoot with flexibility from the beginning and throughout the shoot. And I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons in commercial production. Good commercial production isn't about delivering the immediate brief. It's about making thoughtful decisions early, from planning, and in this case, location selection, through to how the shoot will realistically run on the day. That helps create a smoother production, and by thinking carefully about the footage we capture, we can give the client flexibility as their needs evolve over time.